My name is Lean Tran Layton, and I'm a practicing immigration attorney in the United States. And I'm an immigrant myself. Throughout my life and career, I've had the privilege of meeting people from all over the world who have immigrated to the United States. And I've heard some amazing stories, and I want you to hear them too. These stories will make you feel a range of emotions, but most of all, I hope you will be left feeling inspired. Welcome to the Immigrant Voice. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast, share it with others and leave us a comment or review wherever you're listening to it. Also, remember to subscribe so you can hear our upcoming episodes. Welcome to the show. I'm excited about today's guest, and I'm excited for you to hear about his story immigrating here as a young child, and then also where he is now in being a part of building a successful business here in Utah. So let us know who you are and where you live now, what brought you here, and how long you've been in the United States.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This is definitely pretty cool. Hourt Lim, I was born in Khao Dang, Thailand, as basically a refugee during the era of the killing fields, Cambodia. We escaped the cities and ran towards the borders of Thailand. So that's where I was born. Currently reside in Utah. We've definitely kind of traveled around the country, or I'd say the world, to finally find our home here. So yeah, happy to be where we are. I think it's a great space. This state has been extremely receptive to people who are immigrants. So really do enjoy it.
So were you born in a refugee camp in Thailand?
I was actually born in a camp right on the border of Thailand and Cambodia. At the time, they had set up a bunch of locations where, those who were running from the outer provinces of the capital, because when the Khmer Rouge came into the capital, they basically started taking over, and then they kind of spread from the capital out. And then they kept pushing people north. So from where we were to where we ended up, it was actually, we were heading straight north right into Thailand, and they had set up several different camps. One of the very well-known ones was the one I was at, which also goes by KID is the acronym, but it's Khao Dang, which is Thailand. And
was it like all of your immediate family that fled?
Yeah, it was our immediate family. There were a few other cousins and relatives that kind of all, we did it as a big group. Not exactly in one big bunch, but, spread out enough that we can keep in touch as we were going. Now, some of this I have to kind of recount based on what my parents had told me, because I wasn't actually born until we got to the camp. Mm-hmm. We stayed at the camp for quite some time, but until the time that we'd left, a lot of my recollections are exactly when we landed here in the States. And I think that's kind of to, what you were asking, what that experience may have been like.
Yeah. So was your mom pregnant with you at the time that they were fleeing?
Wow. They were, in fact, they got married. They were set up in an arranged marriage. Mm-hmm. And, at a different time, I'm going to have to send you a picture of what it looked like. It was basically what you would call a military wedding. They'd have these AKs and everything lined up. They had a bunch of couples lined up, and they just said, all right, you're going to get married. Now, if you didn't get married, you were supposed to go to war and basically fight. There were certain areas where there were still fighting, gunfights, and then certain areas where they just kind of maintained the rule. My dad, short of not wanting to go to the war, decided, okay, I'll get married and do that. And that's how they got married. So.
Wow, that's really interesting. Were they really young when they had to get married?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I think early 20s, barely just turned 20 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, really young. So definitely kind of a shock for them because of the circumstances, right? Because you're getting forced into a marriage where I think prior to that, everybody's just like, we'd like to have some say in it.
Right. Wow, that's pretty crazy. From what obviously you weren't born yet, but I'm sure your parents probably told you some stories. So what was I know that the Khmer Rouge was taking over, and it was just a horrific time in the country. What was there an incident or a particular set of circumstances where they said, okay, we cannot stay here because if we do, we will die?
Yeah, so a little bit of back history on kind of why everybody ended up where they're at, right? There are certain movies that you can watch now. Angelina Jolie has one. There was one back in the 80s called the Killing Fields. But just kind of recount exactly how everybody ended up in the camps. The Khmer Rouge came into the capital, and at that time, we were at the tail end of the Vietnam War, and so some of it had kind of bled into Cambodia. Well, the U.S. was bombing all of the provinces right there close to the border, and because the U.S. was bombing in Cambodia, not Vietnam, the acceptance, or at least what the perception of the United States was, well, they were a bunch of bad people, right? They wanted to come into our country and change the culture, the people, the education. They wanted to change everything and make it a Western world. There was a lot of people that weren't receptive to that. They just didn't want it. And so in that process, it was what you would call kind of a brainwash, right? That started out in the outer provinces or outer cities or towns. And when it took, where I think it just kind of really took shape or form, was when one of the leaders that was given power by the king to go and basically round up the troops and try to fight some of that off, his thoughts and ideas and ideologies were way off. So what he did was he gathered all the people on the countryside and said, we have to fight the Americans. So in that process, when he gathered enough people, he literally marched the people, the farmers, into the city and basically scared everybody. Said, hey, the Americans are going to bomb the capital. Wasn't the case, but it was one of the tactics in really kind of taking over controlling. So at that point, the moment they got into the capital, news spread. Now, that time, news travels a little slower, but it finally started spreading fast enough that people in certain cities and stuff started getting news of it. That, hey, the Khmer Rouge are coming in. They were supposed to protect us from the Americans. It was a lie. They came in, and now they're going to go and do a cleansing, right? It's genocide. They came in and said, we're going to start wiping out stuff. Or, the ideas of the West or any influence of the West, any educated people, they're going to just take out. So in that process, my dad at the time, his family owned a bunch of markets. My mom did, they were traditional farmers and whatnot. My dad, fortunately, they caught wind of it sooner. So they packed up as much of the store as they could and just started heading north, because everybody said that they were heading up, or they were setting up a bunch of camps up north. In that process, they still got caught up. The Khmer Rouge caught up in time, and they started gathering groups to do farming, trying to teach them the ideologies that they have and whatnot. And so, there was that process. They were able to escape at a certain point where it hadn't reached its peak in terms of the mass killing, but they escaped it in time that, they gathered the families and started running north. But the other thing that's tricky about this whole time was that not only were you fighting the Khmer Rouge, you were fighting the Vietnamese, and then you were also fighting Thai robbers, right? You'd run north and they would rob and rape and pillage. It was from all sides, because they knew that, these people are scattered and they all carried their, the most precious belongings with them. So it was an eventful time. I mean, the recounts from my dad, my uncles, aunts, grandparents, even other people's, would all share that same information.
So I imagine that a lot of them, like a lot of your family members, probably knew people who died, right, during that time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we lost a lot of family members. I lost a couple uncles. There's a few people that, I mean, at this point, I just know that if it was a head count, there was plenty of people that we lost out. Some of them we've kind of forgotten. It's kind of wild.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy. I was reading a little bit about it, and it was an atrocious time, everything that was going on in the country. And I mean, it seemed very similar to what happened to the Jewish people under Adolf Hitler's rule.
Yeah. It's not a gas chamber. It was just fields with a hatchet or an axe or maybe a bullet to the head right into these fields. And those fields are, I mean, even to this day, you can go out there and see those fields, and it's eerie. You get a sensation of like, what the heck, man? This is intense.
That's crazy. So the leader of the Khmer Rouge, he essentially, I believe what it is he wanted to turn the country, he basically wanted to isolate the country from the world, right? And kind of create this like rural type community.
Yeah, I think he had an idea of really maintaining what he believed the culture to be, what the country or the people, the religions and everything like that. And who knows, I mean, he may have came up with some crazy idea that, the West is trying to change us. We're not going to allow that.
Mm-hmm.
So he started to study some of the, the communist ideas and whatnot, and came up with his own ideas and basically brainwashed a lot of the people. And in that process, obviously millions of people died, but
right.
Yeah, it definitely forced us into the situation I'm in now. I mean, not to say that any of it was bad or that it was bad or good, I'm sorry, but had none of that happened, obviously I would not be here.
Right. Yeah. So going to your parents fleeing, they get to Thailand, you were born. How long were you guys in that camp before coming
there
to
for
the
a couple of years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was definitely a couple of years, but it wasn't even straight to the U.S. So the process when you were there was, you'd have to get sponsored, right?
Mm-hmm.
By whether it be a religious group, some sort of humanitarian group. They would basically allot so many sponsorships. We got picked up, and mind you, a bunch of our family members made it to the same camp, but we got separated from that point because different religious groups were sponsoring, right? You had the LDS Church that was doing one, you had the Catholics that were doing one, you had Lutherans. So we got sponsored by the Lutheran Church, but it wasn't a direct flight into the U.S. Our hop kind of was a little bit different than normal. So we ended up from Thailand, we ended up in the Philippines and stayed in the Philippines for about a year or so. My dad got his some more education in the Philippines, and I think it was part of the transition. They had some vocational schools, and the fact that the U.S. had a presence there. Mm-hmm. I think in part of those transfers, that's where they gave some of us resources to potentially learn a skill. And my dad learned auto mechanics in part of that transition before we landed in the States. So I think we were in the Philippines for, I want to say, almost a year, and then we got our final ticket to Washington, D.C.
Do you remember, I know you were very young during that time, but do you remember anything about those camps?
I don't remember anything of the camps. What I oddly remember, and I don't know why I remember this so vividly, I remember landing in the airport, mm-hmm. like in the U.S. I know it's not supposed to be, I think at 4 or 5 years old, you remember some stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I remember very vividly these weird people coming up to us, like these white people. I'm like, who the heck are these people and where are we going? At that point, there are some spotty memories of like getting picked up at the airport, ending up at some weird person's like building. And I think at that time was a church. Mm-hmm. After going back and revisiting it, come to find out it was a church. There's some introduction to that, but we got to this church. They had already set up kind of a safe house or a place for us to stay in transition. And then with our sponsors, so our specific sponsors, we actually stayed with them for a little bit. And then the moment we had a little bit of money and were able to find some type of work, because my mom ended up house cleaning. My dad ended up doing some off the wall stuff. And then we ended up getting our own apartment at the time, which was predominantly a Black neighborhood. There wasn't any other ethnic group. It was only Black. Mm-hmm. I don't know how my dad ever decided to go pick an apartment in the projects, but we ended up there and we were the only Asians in, surrounding area. Kind of wild.
And what was that experience like living in that neighborhood?
Man, it was intense. There would be nights where people would just randomly knock on our door asking us for help. I remember this one night, my mom, my brother, my sister, my brother, my aunt. So in that house was not just my household. It was his brother and his wife and kid. So there's 2 families in this 1-bedroom apartment. And it was just, There's no furniture. We didn't have furniture. I think we had 1 mattress. No, we had 2 mattresses. That was it. There was nothing else. So you have this 1-bedroom apartment with like mattresses. And every night there was always something crazy. I remember peeking out the window one night and this guy was all bloodied up. And he had saw that we peeked out the window, came running up to our door, knocking on the door, asking my mom for help. I think that's what he was asking for, because at the time I remember him saying something. My mom was like, I'm not opening that door.
Yeah.
But, on a number of occasions, we've had some random things happen like that. It was the ghetto. It was low income.
Yeah.
It was just.
Do you have any siblings?
So my brother was born in the Philippines. Uh-huh. So when we got to Tacoma Park, my brother was born and my cousin, so my dad's son, that was all, that's 3. So there were 7 of us in that apartment.
Like how many square feet do you think that apartment was?
Oh my gosh. A couple hundred. It's small. Gosh. I've been back to it and looked. It's small. Because I did go back and look, and I remember saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe we lived in this closet. But that was an exaggeration. I think I've been to your office, so I want to say it's probably double that size for the 2 bedrooms.
Wow.
Or sorry, not 2 bedrooms, for the 1 bedroom, the bathroom, that's it. And then it has like a little, you walk in, that's it. It's the projects. If you saw it, it would be intense.
Yeah. Obviously, your parents had gone through a lot, escaping, and then they come to America and necessarily live the most extravagant life by any means. And you got to see the things that you experienced at some level, poverty, right?
Right.
And so when you were a kid, what was your mindset like? Like, was it like, okay, when I get older, I never want to be poor again? Like, what was it like?
Well, so on that topic, because poor was, I don't know, I guess at the time you don't realize it, but in hindsight, there was a trip that we took. It was just my mom, myself, and she had this weird little basket cart. I don't know where the heck she got it from, because I think she was a housekeeper for like the church or something like that, or the cleaner for the church or something like that. The way we had gotten our food, because we didn't have a whole lot of money at that time, is we would go and get like expired food that was thrown out. So we went to this grocery store where they threw out food into the trash and would take the food out of there. And that's what we would walk back with. So in terms of like picking out of the trash, I guess you could say that's what we did that, because we definitely picked out a lot of food out of that trash. And we did it frequently enough that, I remember those walks. I remember coming back from that store. I want to say it was like a little market. And I asked my mom one time, and she's like, yeah, it was a little store. We'd go get all the expired food that they would toss. And that's what you guys would, until we can get some money to buy some food. That happened quite a bit.
So when your parents came to America, what do you think their mindset was like? Did they come and were they like, wow, this place is amazing? And even though they went through hard times and like you said, they had to get expired food, was it still to them much better than Cambodia?
Yes. Yeah. Obviously the whole purpose in running was so that you don't end up dead. Right. But the opportunity or the way that it was looked upon was, this is a way for my kids to live, to maybe have the opportunity to, not end up like everybody else back in the country where you were either dead or you were struggling, one of the two. And so this is kind of the reset. And a lot of the things that were being painted as this is the land of opportunity, that was kind of the goal or the objective, was to get here, figure it out, and go from there. And I think in relations to the experience that they just came from, anything was better than what they just came from.
Yeah.
So here to the States was like, who cares if we have to pick food out of the trash? It was just, you don't have to go and dodge bullets and landmines, right? So that was a pretty big thing. I mean, that matter of fact, that was their main motivation, but then to say that there was an opportunity, that was the other.
Yeah. What about before everything happened in Cambodia, when life was quote unquote normal for them? Mm-hmm. Was their life pretty good there?
So my dad was. My mom, she was on the countryside. I wouldn't say it was bad, but it was just a lifestyle that they were used to. My dad's side of the family has been very entrepreneurial through the generations. They've always owned or operated some sort of business, right? Mm-hmm. What's really wild about Cambodia, and this is something that most people probably, unless you go and dig it up, you would have never known.
Yeah. Cambodia
was leaning towards being very Western. Like everything was set up just like here in the States. Mm-hmm. Our music was similar to that, in the 40s and 50s. The clothing, the lanes, the roads, everything looked like you were in the States, maybe in Florida. That's what it looked like. When I think Pol Pot discovered that, or when he came upon his idea of, oh crap, they're changing our country into being American and we're losing our identity, that may have inspired him to get as crazy as he did. But if you go back, it was normal. I mean, it really looked like any normal city. There's bikes on the side, not in the middle.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've been back to Vietnam. Bikes everywhere,
haven't.
Right? What?
I have not been back yet. I know. I need to make it there one day.
There's a bucket list item. So one of the things you'll identify with when you go back is bikes are everywhere. Cars are just kind of weaved in and out. But it doesn't seem, it's pretty much chaotic, but it's normal and it works. Well, even prior to all that, during the war, dude, I'm telling you, Cambodia looked like the States. There wasn't anything much different. People obeyed the law and they drove on the sides they were supposed to drive on. Right after the war, it basically destroyed the country. Yeah,
so,
pretty wild.
Yeah. So your parents are here, what were some of because I remember my parents, more especially my mom, she would consistently repeat certain things to me, like make sure you get an education because that's something that you'll always be able to fall back on. If you get married, if your spouse leaves you, if you get divorced, your spouse dies, no matter what, you can still be an independent woman. And so she told me that all the time. Like it was just a consistent theme with her, like be an independent woman, be somebody who's educated, that you never have to rely on somebody to take care of you. So what were some of the things that you remember your parents telling you consistently?
Actually, a lot of the similar things that your parents told you. I think it's odd. Not odd, but what's pretty common in the Southeast Asian, I wouldn't even just say Asians in general, is education is a very key thing, right? And going back to my dad growing up, education was like harped upon, like in the family. They all learned like 2 to 3 languages each. They were told to learn some sort of skill set. And so those same ideas were definitely enforced as I was growing up, because, they wanted to, one, make sure I can obviously take care of myself, but we're in a new country. You're not going to make it, or at least that's what their thought was, is you aren't going to make it if you don't get an education. You don't want to be looked down upon. You don't want to be treated differently. You want to be able to succeed and, if anything, do better than the next, right? Prove to them that we didn't just come here to, when I say that, prove to those who look upon us as being immigrants, as groups that come in and just kind of take, right? But not the case. For us, it was how do we show that our value? And one, the only way through that is through education first, and then making sure that once we get the education, we continue. Because if not, they're always like, don't just go to school, just go to school. Right. Go to school so you can make a lot of money, and then you can take care of your family, do all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's the same Asian, teachings and ideas.
And what kind of student were you, would you say?
It was weird. I was always a pretty good student up to a point where I felt like, and I don't know when exactly it happened, but there was a point where I felt like I wasn't being challenged quite enough. And so in part of that process, I started becoming incredibly rebellious. So following suit in terms of Southeast Asian Cambodians, you picked 2 different routes. You either went to school and just stayed the course and did your thing, or you kind of started to say, you know what, I'm being looked at differently, or I get treated differently. And you let the outside impact you enough that you started to do the inappropriate things. And so in my teenage years, I can't say that I was a good kid or even a good teenager. I don't know why it happened the way it did, but in our generation, a lot of these Southeast Asians were kind of separated into 2 groups. You had kind of the troublemakers. Unfortunately, I kind of fell into that category. And then you had those who stayed the course and did really well. Oddly enough, I did both. I did school and I caused a lot of trouble. But school, I didn't feel challenged up to a point. I was able, even though I was causing all kinds of chaos, I was still able to graduate early, which was really odd. I don't know how I did that, but I managed to do that one. Everybody that I grew up with did not finish school. Nobody that I grew up with finished school. It's just I guess the circle of people, I was surrounded by, but I finished school and continued to keep doing it. And then I realized at one point, I was like, you know what, I can be a good student, but I guess I'm more of a doer than just one of the guys that just listens, right? And that's just been always the thing, is I reached the point where I felt like school had hit its pinnacle for me and like its peak in what I could learn. So, I jumped into corporate America at a really, really young age. Most people, they say, well, they started the career at like 22, 23. I actually started at 17.
Wow.
Yeah, really, really early.
That is really early.
But with guidance, and I had a mentor. And my mentor stayed with me for about 8 years throughout my early career.
So what was that first job? My
first job ever was actually at a movie theater, but I did a bunch of different things. I don't know if you remember in that era, there was a lot of call centers.
Yes,
right?
I do remember. I worked at a couple of them.
Yeah, I did fast food for a couple of years. The moment I was old enough to work, it was like immediately my dad's like, go work. I'm like, wow, I can't be a kid anymore. You want me to work? But that happened almost immediately. I mean, I think I started Honestly, because we've always owned a business as a family too. And this is going back a little bit. Is my family's always owned some sort of business. When we left Maryland, we ended up in California. And the attraction of California was because of employment, but not so much employment. It was more opportunity. My family is a family of bakers on my dad's side. Everybody is either a chef or a baker. And so following the traditional, I guess what you would call traditional Cambodian path, we opened several donut shops in California. And if you ask almost any Cambodian in the United States, what is one thing that their families probably owned at one point? It was probably a donut shop. I mean, you have these stereotypical associations, and crazy enough, it's Cambodians were donut shops. We owned a lot of them. The other thing we did own was we owned a sewing factory. And when we lived in LA or Long Beach, we had a sewing factory that I did work for, like Mervyn's, California. Oh my gosh, the amount of clothing we pumped out of that little shop was amazing. Wow. But yeah, so, you know, I've always worked. I mean, it was kind of like a normal transition, but now I had to answer to somebody else instead of my dad or my mom. Like, I can say no and not want to do it, probably not get away with it. But man, when you actually start working for somebody else, it's a little different.
So your parents went so you guys landed as far as the U.S., D.C., moved to California, and I presume that your parents just worked hard and saved up a bunch of money.
Yes.
Went to California, and did they immediately open those businesses there?
They did work at a couple places to kind of save up money to finally get to the point where they had seen some other families succeed in the donut business. And then it was one, and then it was two, and then, you know, it just kind of grew from there. There is a little bit of a gap in that story because we actually, from California, we were only there for about a year, and then we jumped to Utah. We had somehow found my grandparents here in Utah. We stayed in Utah for about a year or two, and then we moved right back to California and opened up, you know, all those businesses. So my house, or at least my family, jumped around quite a bit. And it was just to find family because we all got split up because of the different sponsors.
So are those businesses still in existence today?
No. So we shut down operation for almost all our businesses right after the LA riots. During the riots, even though it was predominantly in LA, it kind of bled out to different parts of the state. You know, some of it ended up in Long Beach, which was where our sewing factory was. And so they started the riots, and they started the looting, and they started all these fires. And something had happened in one of the strip malls, and it caught onto the warehouse of the factory. And at that point, we were like, you know what, we're not going to deal with this. So they shut the sewing factory down. The donut shops, right after the riots, this is when, you know, a lot of different activities happening in the Asian community as far as like violence, right? It started happening in the late 80s, early 90s. And I think it was just because of different ethnic groups finally clashing, right? You know, you look at where we were at in LA, you had Monterey Park, San Gabriel, predominantly Vietnamese, Chinese, and then you had Long Beach, predominantly Cambodian, then you go up to LA, Hollywood area, Thai people. So we had this huge clash of different ethnic groups, and violence started to happen. Gangs started to form. It was wild. In the early 90s, it was shootings every night. So that was pretty normal. Then you had the LA riots, and that was kind of like the icing on the cake. We're like, look, we're done with this. And then business was starting to kind of slow down. And so they decided to shut them all down in about, I want to say 94. 94 is when we shut down everything. And then my family ended up moving to Utah.
And then they've been here since?
We've been here since. This is it.
So going back to what we're talking about with your first corporate job, what was it?
So it was a call center.
Okay.
Just like I said, during that era, it was a lot of call centers. So I don't know how I got inspired to do what I did, but I was just working on the call center for, at the time, it was like long distance calling for here, you know, interstate. We were just customer support. Well, the business is growing rapid, really, really fast. And the attrition in most call centers, or, you know, turnaround, you get people, they get hired on, they leave within a week or two. They just don't like it. I was just happy that I didn't have to, you know, do some sort of fast food or get up and do any type of manual labor and just sit there in front of a computer, which is kind of what I gravitated towards anyway. And so for me, that was the perfect setup. So I stuck it through for about a year. And as the company grew, well, I started there when I was 16. So as the company grew, we moved into a new building, everything like that. And in that move, there was only like a handful of us that came from the old building. And so I guess just by seniority's sake and the fact that I stayed it out, they started kind of looking at people who would, want to grow the company. It wasn't a whole lot of future, but, they were just trying to get people to stay. They brought on a guy who, ultimately became my mentor. He had identified the fact that I was kind of going down the path of getting in more and more trouble, but also trying to maintain this work and school life. And I don't know how he did it, but he was able to pull me aside and say, hey, look, just follow my lead. And, I'm going to teach you some stuff that they won't teach you in school. I'm like, man, whatever. You're just you're just blowing a bunch of smoke. He did. He honored everything he said. He said, just follow me. And I did. Within a year of working at that place, I became a supervisor at 17 with no clue of what to do or how to manage people or any of that crap. And I just remember thinking to myself, what the heck am I doing? I was just excited that I was making more money. I was like, I'll just do it anyway, see what happens. So I did it. And from there, that's where my career started. At first they only gave me like maybe 6 people to manage. It went from like 6 to like, 20, 30. Then within like, I think 6 months, if I remember, about 7 months, half that center was mine. So the center housed about 400 people. I took about 200. So within a year's time, I ran half the center. We had another person run the other half. And then the company kept growing, which I was like, cool, more opportunities. And so my mentor was like, look, let's get you out of operation. Let's teach you some new stuff. So I went through and took some courses and whatnot. And they threw me into account management, client relations. That was kind of fun. Mind you, I was not as well spoken. Like, I think the way I talked to people was like as abrasive as they come. And I think definitely not considered professional, but for whatever reason, it would work. So yeah, my career evolved from that point on.
So did you ever go to college?
I did. So I went to school for computer science, which is really weird because most of everything I was doing was business related. For whatever reason, I was always attracted to technology. I had an uncle who was a programmer. And this is in the days of like bulletin boards, before the internet was the internet. And I would watch him code and I would watch him program. And for some stupid reason, I was so I would sit there and watch him type for hours and be like, I want to learn that.
Yeah.
And so early 90s, matter of fact, if you're a techie, you know what a Commodore 64 is. It's like one of the first personal computers that you can have in your house. We had one. I mean, it's expensive as hell, but we had one. But he was programming. He was doing stuff on it. Mm-hmm. I learned a lot from that. And then when I was in junior high, I was probably a little bit more advanced in computers than most of the kids in junior high. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was doing things that weren't supposed to be done. But, you remember those little Apple computers that are just the screen and the little floppy drive?
Yes.
They had those. They had the little 10 megabyte computer. Everybody thought it was amazing. Well, I had learned enough from my uncle that I just kept it. So I decided to go into computer science for my degree. But because of my employment and how it turned me into the person I am today, I was dealing with people, right? And so programmers aren't typically extroverted people, right? Programmers they're more, their thought process is different. And so what had happened was almost 2 years into my study, I was sitting there in a class full of programmers, and we were tasked with writing a program. And once we were done, we can leave. I was the last one to leave. Well, actually, I wasn't even the last one to leave, but I was close to being the last one to leave. And at that point, I realized it's not me. Mm-hmm. It's not me. I don't know how these guys are doing it that fast. And I got so irritated. I just walked up and left. I didn't even finish this dang program. Mm-hmm. I was so embarrassed because literally people were finishing within minutes, and it took me almost an hour. And so I dropped out of that and went into business administration.
So fast forward to what you do now. How did you get into, I want people to know about the business that you're in and how you got into it.
So it's a little tricky. I think those other earlier life experiences allowed me, or at least had shaped me into how I handle opportunities, right? Because having to work with, customers and whatnot, you had to be able to find opportunity. And so that was kind of the foundation for what allowed me to go and start hunting down opportunities or create them. So yeah, fast forwarding probably about 10 years, almost, I'd say about 10, 15 years. It's definitely been a journey. It's not, people look at it like, oh, you've been doing this for some time. I've been in the industry for a long time, but it definitely did not happen overnight. It took time in building, whether it's the expertise, the client base, the relations and whatnot. So it didn't happen until about almost 10 years ago that certain things had really kind of come together. There was an opportunity to invest in a group that I was working with. They're willing to give me what I asked for. It works. Well, it didn't work out. And I'm sad to this day that it didn't work out, because now that company is it's like $1 billion company now. I'm sad, super sad. It's one of those opportunities, right? But it didn't work, but it definitely set the path for where I am now. Mm-hmm. So accelerating the story, what had happened was, there were some opportunities there. It didn't work out. The investment, they didn't take it. And so I was getting ready to actually move back overseas, because it's where I met my wife. And so, we had some opportunities overseas, and I'll get into it in a second. But because of some of the things that have happened in between those stories, I said, okay, well, let's move back overseas and let's just go work for the family business overseas. And I was somehow scouted by the company that I'm at now, and they said, hey, don't leave. Come and help us, build this thing the right way, right? It had already been in existence, but they just weren't quite nailing it on a certain thing. We came to an agreement. I jumped on board, more kind of from an observation standpoint, because I wasn't sure if it was a thing for me either, right? After that deal had gone south, I'm like, I'm done, man. These guys, people in this valley are difficult to deal with. It wasn't the case. It was just I had a bad taste in my mouth. After joining the organization, I'm like, okay, I have to find what it is, the opportunity is. And in talking to one of the partners, the guy that actually scouted me, he's like, hey, we have to create this. I'm like, wow, you're talking about creating something from nothing. And so he's like, well, if you can put some money into the company, we can do this. So after vetting it out for about 90 days or so, we ended up investing into the company and took a pretty good stake in the company. And from that point, we are where we are now, and the company has grown double, triple, and we continue to hire. We've expanded our office. So the story has definitely been a long run, but the opportunities there, you just have to take advantage of it.
If you wouldn't mind sharing, like, what's the name of the company you work for, and what do they do?
Yeah, so I am with Blue Eye Defense, previously Blue Eye Monitoring. We are a technology-backed service provider. What we do now is, what everybody associates security with is either cameras or people. Mm-hmm. We kind of bridge the gap, right? We make people much more effective and technology much more usable. So we do that with the technology by, connecting with humans. You can have a security guard walk around doing nothing all day, or you can have a bunch of cameras just recording. They don't do anything for you. Well, if you bridge them and you bring them both together to make them effective, it's a very powerful tool. Our growth in the last 6 months has just been to the point where we were busting at the seams. And so now we're trying to maintain that growth. And in the current climate of the economy, we just continue to do better, unfortunately and fortunately. Mm-hmm. It's chaotic in the world. We're the guys that they call upon.
So I was actually...
Or the people that they call upon.
Yeah. So I actually looked online to find out more about the company, and just to give people an idea of what you guys do. So I was looking on the website, and then I saw some videos of just samples of like what you guys do. And yes. So I see this video, and it's, security footage, and you see these people on camera doing what looks like they're about to do something that's not legal. And then all of a sudden you hear over like an intercom or like a speaker, like, hey, you in the red shirt,
yes,
stop what you're doing now. And we're going to call the authorities. And then that immediately deters them, and you see them running off. And so for people who are listening, so that's essentially what the company does. Is
go check it out. I think that's what people are they're gonna wonder, obviously. But go look at the videos. I mean, it tells you a lot about what we do. There's a lot of skeptics in, everybody thinks security is crap, but no, you can actually make it really effective. And the funny thing is, nobody likes to be talked to during the middle of a crime.
No, that probably scares the crap out of people when they suddenly hear somebody over an intercom identifying them. And it's not just like a generic, like, hey, get off our property, where you can kind of tell that it's maybe pre-recorded or something and someone just hits a button and plays it. It's specific, like, hey, you in the red shirt, stop what you're doing. And so I thought that was actually pretty cool. Like, I thought that was like that. Like you said, I think it does bridge the gap in that it's not just, a lot of times businesses just have cameras recording, but no one's watching the camera. So someone can commit a crime, but no one's stopping them. And it's like after the fact. And then on the other hand,
Right.
you have like physical security guards there. One, what if the criminal is armed, right? And they have a weapon on them. So I think it's genius. How many employees do you guys have now?
I think we're at like 50 something. I should know, but I think we're, a mutual friend of ours would know because he runs the operation. But I think we're over 50 now. When we started, to give a little bit of, I guess, reference, when I started, I think we're like 15, 15 or like 18 or something like that. So we've definitely grown.
And what's your job title there?
So this is the gray that I exist in. I guess my role, if it were to be translated into a job title, is, you can call it managing director. I don't know, COO, something. But I kind of touch every part of the business, short of being the CEO. And it was from more of a strategic standpoint because there's a lot of the industry that I had brought with me when I left the previous company. And so my whole entire purpose was to identify opportunities with the technologies that existed and maybe create one if it didn't. And so it's not really a good title, and that's a problem. Even on the website, if you look at it, it says business development. The problem is the product is also mine and so forth. But, it's a team effort. The one thing about our group or our company is it's pretty much a round table where everybody's, for the most part, equal.
So obviously you've been through a lot. Your family's been through a lot. I mean, in some ways, well, in a lot of ways, pre-war in Cambodia, your family did pretty well. Like you said, your dad did pretty well. They came here, they had to start from zero and build up again. And so for you obviously probably took a lot of lessons from that.
Yeah.
And obviously you found success. So what are some of the things, the values and the beliefs that carried you from childhood until now that you think have helped you have success?
Here's something for a lot of, we obviously know a lot of other immigrants and even people who just barely come here. One of the advantages, and everybody paints it a little differently, but the perspective that we have, or at least that I have now, is this. When you come here with nothing and you start at zero, you have an advantage, right? Because there's really only one way to go. I mean, it can't get any worse than where you came from. And so that's fuel for the fire. But then when you realize that, and there are plenty of examples of immigrants coming here who do incredibly well. It just takes the perseverance. It takes a little bit of thick skin because I don't know about you, but I didn't learn how to speak English until I was about 6 or 7, almost 8. My English was broken. They would make fun of my parents at school. They would make fun of me. Man, it was intense. I remember many of those opportunities, but you have to be able to almost repel a lot of that. And that's kind of fuel, right?
Yeah.
Because that was my motivation. I'm going to show that I'm actually more capable or, I'm worth more than that. And I have just as much of an opportunity as you do. And that's kind of the reason why I think, even if I fail once or twice, which, trust me, I've failed quite a few times now, I know that the opportunity still exists. The States is a very unique place. The same could be said about opportunity elsewhere too, but it's different here. It really is a level playing field from the gate. Now, once you start climbing and you start going up, it changes. It definitely changes. The rules of the games change, but it's different than anywhere because it is a leveled field right from the gate. That's been primarily a source of how I got to where I'm at today, is by saying, look, anybody can do it here, then there's no reason why I can't. And then if I really want it that bad, I'm going to chase it. Yeah. And that's the thing. You have to want it.
Yes, I agree.
And this is something I have to ask you too, because I think we know a lot of immigrants. We know a lot of people that come here. A lot of our relatives and friends and family, there's a subset of them that do extremely well. And then there are those who are complacent, right? That's dangerous. They leave the war-torn country to come here like, oh, this is better than war. And then they assume that that's it.
Right.
That's dangerous.
I agree. I think that as humans, we find fulfillment in continuing to grow, continuing to learn new things. And I think it's when you're in that space of complacency, that's where a lot of unhappiness stems from, a lot of making bad choices. But yeah, I think that people should always seek to grow, to seek to learn. And even if you fall flat on your face doing it, at least you can look at that and not look at it as a failure, but look at it as a lesson, because I think that's how you ultimately find, or how should I say this? I think that you don't know how good something feels when you achieve it unless you've failed miserably at it.
Yes, there's definitely, you definitely give it a different value. The satisfaction in accomplishing something after multiple failures is so much different than just getting it right off, on the first try.
Right.
It's just different.
Right. And going back to what you had said, like I said, you've found a lot of success now, but I'm sure in between all of that, there was a lot of failure, a lot of like, what am I doing? Yeah. Why am I doing this? Maybe I should just give up. But there's a lesson in that you just have to keep going, because otherwise, if you're not growing, you're dying. That's a phrase I've heard.
Yes, very true. And I'm not going to say this is an advantage over anybody or that this is what separates us from others. But one of the things I have to attribute some of my perseverance to is our culture, mm-hmm. the Asian culture. Mm-hmm. There's a very deep root in you have to succeed in our culture. There's not much. I mean, even the stereotype of, we get a B and we're in trouble, right?
Right.
There's some truth to that. I mean, mm-hmm. but that's part of the culture. We come from a system that growth is looked upon real well. Failure is not looked upon well. And that, sometimes that could be to a person's detriment. But in a lot of cases here in the States, if you truly embrace it, man, that's why yourself included, there's a lot of people who have done well or have found themselves in situations where you can be proud of. In our circle of people that we know, I can name off some pretty, and success can be measured in a lot of different ways, right?
Right.
It's not necessarily monetary, but just the fact that your career is stable and you have something you really enjoy doing. Conversations like these only motivate me to say, look, we got to keep doing it. I mean, there are other people in our previous situations where, we were immigrants. The opportunity's there. You just have to keep digging and going. Yeah. It's harder for us. That's the reality. Mm-hmm. I don't know what other people want to argue about, but come to a country where you don't speak the language and turn it into something where you can say, look, if I can do it, you can too. Don't give me otherwise.
My parents came here with nothing. They had, I think, $100. I've said this previously before, and 2 little kids, no English. And it's unfortunate that they never had the opportunity to get an education, because my parents are actually very, very bright people. And so their opportunities were limited, but what they did is they turned that into, we are going to do whatever we can for our kids so that they can have the success that we only dreamed of. And so they did, I have to say, they did a really good job at doing that, because I would have to say that all of us kids, I think, turned out pretty decent. And so, so instead of them going out and maybe doing things that they had always dreamed of, they instead passed it on to the kids. And my parents have actually achieved a lot. And to this day, they never had these big fancy jobs, but they've had stable jobs. And even to this day, they're always asking us, let me know if you need help. If you ever find yourself in a hard financial situation, let me know and I'll help you. And so they're still just, to this day, still continuing to be like, how can we help you? How can we help you? And they don't ever expect anything back in return either. We're fortunate to have parents like that.
Imagine if, it's funny, your parents and kind of how, there's not you can't measure what they're willing to give you. I think we have to recognize their efforts, because if we had to say that if it were us in that shoe, I mean, could we perform what they did? Could we endure what they did? Right. I mean, I don't even know how my parents did it. Honestly,
I don't either.
Our parents are crazy. They're awesome.
Yeah, the things that I think about now that are, I'm a parent, I have 2 kids, and truthfully, it's like first world problems that I'm dealing with. And I don't know how my parents did
Yes.
it. I really don't.
Oh my gosh, so true.
Yeah.
So true. First world problem.
So you talked about at one point you were going to go back to Cambodia and live there. And so it sounds like you're still pretty tied to the culture in that you've still honored certain traditions and things like that. And you've been back, obviously, to Cambodia.
Yes.
So what's a cultural value in Cambodia that you admire, that you would like to, like if you could bring it here and share it with people, what would it be?
So there's a Western thought in once your kids hit a certain age in their life, that independence is to be really embraced, right? While I'm okay with that, what I have learned in our culture is independence is great. If the child is able to really embrace it and get it done, great. It's a good life lesson, all that stuff. But in our culture, as you probably know as well, our parents don't want us to go anywhere. They want to support us and each other until the end of time. And that type of support is it has its benefits. It has a lot of values. Sometimes it can create problems, but it definitely has some tremendous value in that. If you needed help in anything in the times that you may fall flat, where we see a lot of failures happen here with those who are independent, not everybody is self-motivated, right? You just don't have everybody that way. In the Asian culture, success, you can fail quite a few times, and you could almost guarantee you'll get I'd say a pretty good percentage of your families supporting you through probably until you go yourself. Those types of family values, those type of support structures, not to say that they don't exist in the Western culture, or at least here in the States, but it is pinnacle in everything we do overseas that, if your kids, I don't care if you're 30, I'm going to ride with you until the wheels fall off. Mm-hmm. That is it's the culture. It's part of it. They don't want you to move away. They want you to stay there with them. Yeah. Good Lord.
Yep. That's the same with my parents too. I'm sure that if I was like, Mom and Dad, I'm going to come live with you again, they'd be like, okay, sure. Come on back.
Yeah. See, but it's that type of support, cultural support. I mean, that's one thing that's a little different here. I mean, here, I'm not saying everybody believes in it, but there's definitely an idea of, look, you're 18, you're an adult, you can do what you need to. Mm-hmm. No, you're still a kid to me. I'm gonna wait till you're 30, then you're probably a kid.
Yeah. So, last question would be, what are your hopes and dreams here in America? Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind for your kids?
Really similar to that, my dad. So my dad just recently passed, and one of the things that was very key to him is family, right? But working hard together and accomplishing our goals. So our goals are all individualized. Mine has been primarily the legacy that I do want to leave behind is, I'm going to build something for our family, but I do want to build a lifestyle or a comfort for them that would still allow them to learn. But at the same time, I don't want them to go through some of the stuff I had to go through.
Right.
And, it's a fine line to walk, right? Because you don't want them to have to struggle too hard.
Right.
But I do want them to learn from my experience that it's going to take work and you can accomplish. So as an example, I've gone through some pretty challenging times, some of them self-inflicted, but in the end, if it's there and if you use me as an example, if I can do it, just about anybody can. I mean, you can say, everybody's hit a rock bottom. I hit a point where I think rock bottom was like I was in the dirt, not even so much the rock anymore. And so it was bad. And that's the thing that I can say, if I left today, the legacy I do want to leave behind is that even in the worst, there's still an opportunity, and there's still good to be had or made of it. So that's really the biggest thing for for my family, myself. I just want to create that. That's all I want. I don't need them to be super rich or any of that. Not that that's a bad thing either, but
yeah,
that's what I'm looking for.
Well, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and thank you for sharing about your experiences and hardships. And I'm so happy to hear that you have found the success that you have. And I wish you only the best moving forward.
Hey, thank you so much for allowing me to share. I mean, my story, I think everybody's story, it goes on and on, right? But I think the points are hopefully everybody who is listening. Look, I'm telling you, I've gone through a lot, and anybody can do it. So this platform is going to be awesome. And again, I do appreciate it. I'm glad that you're doing this because it's actually really good for a lot of those of us, not only just for the immigration process, but those who have been through it to at least say, hey, guys, this is what you're going to have to deal with. Mm-hmm. It's helpful.
Well, good. I'm glad. Well, thank you so much.
We'll definitely have to chat some other time. But thank you again.